We've all wanted to live in a dream world at some point. That might mean you saw a fictional society in a movie or a TV show that you would like to reside in for a while. Or maybe you saw a picture of the most beautiful sunset over shimmering waves and thought, wow, I wish I could live there. Or maybe you dabbled in lucid dreaming in order to take total control of your unconscious mind and do whatever you wanted during a dream. All fascinating prospects rife with escapist possibility. But what if the dream world you entered was dangerous? What if it was filled with horrible creatures intent on killing you? What if there were sights so awful they could tear your mind apart? Well, that's the kind of dream world that H.P. Lovecraft came up with. Hello, fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're going to be asking a question that has inspired many a horror author. What if the Lovecraftian Dreamlands were real? Before we get started, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more otherworldly oscillations. Perfect, let's begin. When most folks talk Lovecraft, they're usually referencing the Cthulhu mythos and all of its gods and abominations. A good deal of tales involved in said mythos lean heavily on horror elements, including the irrelevance of humanity in the face of the terrors of the universe and the mind-rending possibilities of the unknown. We're introduced to great old ones and some classic locations, and a lot of the pieces that people are most familiar with. However, that's just part of Lovecraft's output. There is a whole other side to it all, a more fantastical world to explore. One where anything can happen, where dreams can become reality. Of course, we're talking about the dream cycle. There are a good deal of common elements between the dream cycle and other Lovecraftian work, but they are unique stories. Lovecraft put together the dream cycle over a period of about 15 years, stringing together multiple stories that all deal with a dream realm. This realm is an alternate dimension only accessible to humans through dreams. It's essentially a mirror image of our waking universe with the same planets, stars, and other assorted cosmic geography. However, the similarities end there, as this world is inhabited by many beings that do not exist in our world. Ever heard of a Zoog? What about a Gug? Maybe some ghasts, moon beasts, or cats? Well, I'm sure you've heard of cats. Plenty of famous Lovecraftian locales are introduced in these tales, from the plateau of LENG to the city of Celophace to the mountains where gods dwell. This might be obvious to some, but I might as well clear this up now. Most of what Lovecraft wrote concerning dreams actually came from his very own sleep-based visions. The man would peer into other worlds often as he slumbered, giving life to the worlds so many now read about. Would you want to have dreams like this? Sure, the creativity they offer is incredible, but you'd also be subjected to horror after nightly horror. Up to you, I suppose. As I mentioned earlier, the dream cycle often focuses on more sci-fi and fantasy elements than other Lovecraft work. However, they still employ his classic cosmic horror, among other things. If you're into grand adventure and insane fictional cities, then this is the Lovecraftian content for you. For the first 8 years or so, Lovecraft built up the Dreamlands through short stories and novellas detailing different people and places. He kicked it off with Polaris, the tale of a man who dreamed of a marble city full of robed men. This is likely autobiographical, at least partially so. The dreaming man hears the residents speak in a language he himself has never heard before, but somehow still understands it. Soon, he is assimilated into the city and becomes one of the citizens. After he fails in his duty to protect the city, he wakes up and becomes convinced that the real world is just a dream from which he cannot wake. This is a theme that occurs often in the dream cycle, the idea that dreams can be more than reality. Over time, Lovecraft expands on this idea through recurring characters and locales. We journey on the White Ship, visiting different islands that will reappear later in the cycle. We learn of the people of Sarnath, who are transformed into hideous lizard creatures after wiping out a race of monsters. We discover that cats are considered untouchable in Ulthar because a traveler invoked a prayer that caused swarms of felines to descend upon a cruel couple. It's around 1920 that Lovecraft really gets into the swing of things with his Dreamlands and introduces the city of Celophace. This is a majestic dream city created by the great dreamer Kuranes. Kuranes is not the dreamer's real name, but the name given to him after becoming the sort of god king in his imagined world. After dreaming this place again and again, he eventually slipped into it, becoming a permanent resident with powers over its populace. His real body dies, leaving his dream form to live forever within the imagined world. This idea is expanded upon in the story Ex Oblivion. where a man keeps dreaming of a locked gate. He wishes deeply that he could discover what is on the other side and eventually discovers other people's accounts of the world beyond it. Some are beautiful and positive, while others condemn all those who would try to see the horrors beyond. Waiting to see for himself, the man finds a way inside and discovers that both accounts are technically true. The only thing beyond the gate is the void of death, meaning that there is wonderment of being free from the pain of the real world, but also the terror of absolute nothingness. Whoever can fill this space with their dreams can make it whatever they want. After a few tales about ignorance being bliss, Lovecraft expands on the beauty and terror of the void in Hypnos. A sculptor and his friend travel throughout the Dreamlands for lengthy periods of time, eventually making it to a void beyond human sensation. The sculptor cannot go any further, but his friend does. Upon waking, the friend insists that they avoid sleep for as long as possible, even using drugs to keep them awake. From then on, whenever they succumb to sleep, they age rapidly and are plagued with nightmares. There's a twist too, but I won't spoil it. All of these stories so far work well on their own, but really are just a setup. See, in 1926, Lovecraft put out a novella called The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. If you're going to read one dream cycle story, this should be it. It takes all of the elements introduced earlier and puts them into one crazy adventure. It also introduces Randolph Carter, who will show up in a few other tales as well. Randolph is a prolific dreamer, and he keeps seeing visions of a beautiful sunset city. He wants to find this place, so he enters the Dreamlands in search of it. He meets the cats from Ulthar and manages to get to the moon after being kidnapped by moon beasts. It turns out these beasts work for NYARLATHOTEP, but before they can bring Carter to the crawling chaos, he is rescued and returned to Earth's Dreamlands. From there, he runs into ghouls, gugs, ghasts, and night gaunts before meeting up with Kuranes from the story of Celophace. Kuranes tries to convince him to end his quest, but Carter continues on. At the climax of his journey, he meets a priest that turns out to be NYARLATHOTEP himself. The crawling chaos tells Carter that the gods have seen the city in his dreams and opted to live there instead of Kadath. Carter is then sent away on a Shantak bird and realizes that NYARLATHOTEP is sending him to the court of AZATHOTH. Remembering that he is still within a dream, he jumps off the bird and thinks of his home in New England. Upon waking up, he realizes that he is in his dream world Sunset City. It's Boston. How nice. Carter shows up in a couple other stories down the line, like The Silver Key, in which he loses his ability to access the dream world after being exposed to too many practical ideas, and then again in Through the Gates of the Silver Key, where he meets YOG-SOTHOTH and discovers that he is a facet of a much greater being. There are a few tales that I skipped over, but that sort of gives you the general gist of the Dreamlands. Now, we all understand what the Dreamlands are, so we can move on to the real question. What if they were real? If this were the case, a select few dreamers would have access to worlds of untold fantasy. The Kuraneses and Randolph Carters of the world would have a blast discovering all there is to discover in a world of their own invention. If you were a high-caliber dreamer, you could potentially dream up a magical city full of fascinating creatures. You could learn dream languages and fly on the backs of night gaunts. You could go on quests fraught with danger and meet gods atop mountains. It would all be exhilarating, if not totally dangerous. After dreaming long enough, your physical form would waste away and die, leaving only your dream form. For some, this is just fine. They prefer the dream world anyways. But those who have business in the real world might find this distressing. It eventually happens to everyone who enters the dream world often. Kuranes was the first we know of to do this. Randolph Carter ended up becoming entangled with a wizard and being unable to take his true physical form anymore. The sculptor from Hypnos drove himself insane by dreaming a lot and then stopping cold. Unfortunately, a lot of people have fried their imaginations, leaving them unable to dream themselves into another reality. With an abundance of movies, games, and bingeable series, folks can't find the brain power to transcend into another universe anymore. I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but the average individual is not going to make it to the Dreamlands. We're stuck here, reading about them. Dang. H.P. Lovecraft, a name synonymous with all sorts of unspeakable abominations that exist on a plane way higher than us lowly humans. He essentially invented a whole new genre of horror, one filled with unimaginable entities and powers beyond comprehension. His works are jam-packed with monsters that still haunt the dreams of people, even almost a century after his death. So today we're going to take a look at some of his greatest creations. It's time to count down the top 10 most powerful Lovecraftian monsters. Coming in at number 10, we've got Dagon. King of the Deep and ruler of the Deep Ones, Dagon is an aquatic entity without peer. An enormous amphibious humanoid, he holds absolute domain over the sea. In fact, many unrelated aquatic monsters written by plenty of other authors over the years have used Dagon as inspiration, whether in name or in function. He's just that influential. Dagon's origins are foggy at best, but include all sorts of ancient texts, Mother Hydra, and fraternization with Starspawn. All these things point to extreme power and incredible longevity. Of course, a beast like this doesn't just go around without being discovered. In fact, the whole tale of the Shadow over Innsmouth revolves around a human cult that worships Dagon and his brood. The humans in Innsmouth end up mating with Dagon and the Deep Ones, creating a horrifying human-monster hybrid. Things only get weirder from there, I assure you, so move over Neptune, we've got a new aquatic king. And this one doesn't wield a trident or have a majestic beard. He is scaly and slimy and powerful enough to command respect without any sort of marine weapon. Plus, he seems to be able to attract folks from land to join him in the water. Coming in at number 9, we've got Yogg-Sothoth. Technically not a creation of Lovecraft himself, Yogg-Sothoth came later in the Lovecraftian mythos. Originally penned by Ramsey Campbell, he was a welcome addition to the pantheon of powerful monsters. That's the beauty of Lovecraftian horror, right? If you're involved enough, you can dream up new additions over time. The influence is everywhere, why not capitalize on it? While he isn't an OG old one, Yogg-Sothoth brings a lot to the table. As the god of perversion and depravity, he has domain over a lot of ill-defined ideas. When you hear someone refer to something as perverted or depraved, what are they really talking about anyways? The meaning can change from person to person. What's depraved to an old school teacher is going to differ from the perverse notions of an investment banker. Yogg-Sothoth thrives in this gray area though. He seeks out humans who read perverse and forbidden materials and makes them his servants. Their nastiness only deepens from there, as you might imagine. For now, Yogg-Sothoth is sealed away in a hidden location behind a wall of bricks, but he could potentially be summoned by someone simply reading his name from the Revelations of Galaki. Hopefully none of my mentions today count towards that. Coming in at number 8, Yig, the father of serpents, also known as the snake god. This half-anthropomorphic beast has been worshipped as a god in all sorts of places. First appearing in Lovecraft and Bishop's The Curse of Yig, this ghastly abomination is a gigantic snake with the arms of a man. Sometimes it will appear as a reptilian humanoid creature as well. Fiercely devoted to his children, or all snakes as we might say, Yig will emerge from his slumber every fall to take revenge on those who would do them harm. He punishes snake haters by turning them into horrible human-snake amalgamations, or by simply sending snakes to kill them in their sleep. I know which one I prefer. The quick death. Coming in at number 7, we've got CTHULHU. CTHULHU usurped Yig and took over the deep cavernous Yoth. At one point he chilled on Saturn, but soon decided Earth was a better call if he wanted sacrifices, and CTHULHU loves sacrifices. Too bad he's too lazy to go and get them himself. Also known as the Sleeper of Naki, this despicable slovenly creature rarely stirs at all. Squat and pot-bellied with the head of a toad and fur that reminds one of a sloth-bat combo, CTHULHU is among the laziest of all the cosmic creatures. He refuses to leave his chambers unless mortally threatened, and even then it's a whole ordeal. If anyone disturbs his rest, he will eat them. That is, unless they have a sacrifice to offer. Then he'll let the disturber go and dine on the poor unfortunate soul instead. After eating, he does what any good layabout does and heads back to sleep. Most people would hear all of this and say, great, he'll never get me because I'll never bother him. Easy peasy. But the thing is, CTHULHU rules over a bunch of creatures that can and will go out of their way to grab and kill you. His formless spawn appear to be polymorphic black goo creatures. They're resilient and hard to kill and will take the shape of whatever's necessary to end your life. These blobby beasts can even squeeze into the tightest gaps to continue pursuit. Add that to the legacy cursed serpent men inherited from Yig and you'll see why CTHULHU is a beast you'd rather keep deep underground, fast asleep. Coming in at number 6, we've got GHATANOTHOA. Cthulhu has 3 horrid children, each extremely powerful in their own right. Known as the Zothic Demon Trio, they consist of Xothamog, Ythogtha, and GHATANOTHOA. GHATANOTHOA, the first and most fearsome son of Cthulhu, should not be taken lightly. Horrid in appearance and in power, this Gorgon-like being takes great pleasure in immobilizing people but keeping their minds intact. Their consciousness is trapped in an immobile shell forever, causing them to go mad. The cult worshipping GHATANOTHOA was once the most powerful on the continent but has since fallen from grace thanks to intervention from some elder gods. Coming in at number 5, we've got Cthulhu. Thankfully for everyone on Earth, this great old one is in a state of endless slumber. For now anyways. We think we know what will wake this monstrosity, but as is the case with many Lovecraftian entities, their ways are far beyond our understanding. The once great city of Relia lies in the depths, cradling Cthulhu until he can make his triumphant return, and people really are trying to speed up this process. Appearing as part octopus, dragon, and humanoid with a pulpy, tentacled head and a grotesque, scaly body, Cthulhu uses his telepathic abilities to mold human dreams. Through these slumber-altering powers, he established the cult of Cthulhu, full of people willing to do anything to please their god. Once his city sunk though, his powers became muted. The ocean waters proved to be a great barrier between him and his followers. Still, to this day, his worshippers gather around the world to chant, calling for his return. In his house at Relia, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. Someday he will awaken and his worshippers want to be ready. Coming in number 4, we've got HASTUR, the king in yellow, the unspeakable one, he who is not to be named. Originally described as the god of shepherds, HASTUR has since taken many forms. Some know him as the feaster from afar, a black shriveled monster with razor-tipped tentacles. The feaster pierces people's skulls and sucks out their brains. He was first mentioned in Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow. This collection of short stories centers around a fictional play, sharing the same name as the collection's title. After a relatively benign first act, it will drive readers insane with an absolutely wicked act 2. Lovecraft was so enamored with the idea of this King in Yellow that he started to include elements in his own stories. HASTUR takes many forms in Lovecraft's tales and can be interpreted as a person, a place, an object, or even a god. Everything comes back to the cult of HASTUR and Carcosa. Have you seen the yellow sign? Coming at number 3, we've got NYARLATHOTEP. The craftiest and possibly most evil of all Lovecraftian beings, NYARLATHOTEP brings something unique to the table: knowledge of humans. Most Lovecraftian outer gods don't really acknowledge humans, they're simply too far above us to care. Their minds, however they may work, barely register our lowly presence, if at all. But NYARLATHOTEP knows we're here, and he understands how we operate. With this knowledge, he loves to absolutely ruin people. The Crawling Chaos is a title well deserved, as he spends most of his time sowing discord and causing people to fall into despair. He'll manifest in thousands of different forms to trick and deceive people, slowly but surely drowning them in madness. He's feared and worshipped by countless other Lovecraftian beings, which is a sure sign of a truly powerful entity. But the fact that he uses all of this power to meddle in the lives of lower beings is terrifying. Coming in at number 2, we've got YOG-SOTHOTH, the all-seeing outer god, progenitor of Cthulhu and HASTUR. YOG-SOTHOTH is often called upon to assist mortals in performing all manners of occult deeds and rituals. Many Lovecraftian tales have YOG-SOTHOTH to thank for their monsters, whether it be the barn-blasting beast from Dunwich or the resurrection of the dead by Charles Dexter Ward. YOG-SOTHOTH is all-knowing and will allow himself to be summoned to impart this knowledge upon people. Often it's simply too much for their tiny brains and they immediately go mad. That's the best possible outcome too, as the others involve hideous mutation and widespread destruction. Finally at number 1, we've got AZATHOTH. Without AZATHOTH, there would be nothing. I can't even conceive of a way to interact with this blind idiot god in a way that could even remotely matter. He dreams up everything, is the beginning and the end, is the incredible creature outside of the reaches of our universe. If AZATHOTH were to ever wake, all of existence would be gone in a blink. That is the power that this being has. This is not an entity that will meddle in anyone's lives, nor can it even really be experienced. AZATHOTH simply is and will forever be. Even talking about him at length feels foolish, as there are no words that can properly encompass the scope of his power and his ignorance. That is possibly the scariest part of all. He does not know that all of existence is reliant on his dreaming, and that if the music that keeps him slumbering ever stops, it's unlikely that we or anything remotely like us will ever return. Feeling insignificant? Good. It's always nice to have a little ego check. Over the past century or so, no horror author has been as influential as Howard Phillips Lovecraft. You could argue that his predecessors inspired him and as such deserve this title, but when it all comes down to the wire, HP spawned an entire genre by being unflinching with his vision. The prose isn't always excellent and some of the ideas seem cliche by today's standards, but we wouldn't have nearly as vast a horror landscape without his wild worlds of unspeakable creatures. And today we're going to do our best to speak about said unspeakable creatures. No elder or outer gods on this list, it's going to stick to the smaller and more corporeal beings. Otherwise we just list AZATHOTH and let everyone quiver in their booties. Top 10 scary Lovecraftian creatures. grab your Necronomicon and kiss your brain goodbye because there are some absolutely nasty ne'er-do-wells out there. Coming in at number 10, we've got the Spiders of LENG. Have you ever visited the Plateau of LENG? I mean, it's not likely considering it's a fictional location in the Cthulhu mythos, but if you ever get a chance to go, you should probably abstain. See, there are plenty of things that go on where realities converge, but none of them are worth facing down a giant venomous spider thing. The Spiders of LENG are gigantic, sentient cannibal spiders. These purple arachnid creatures appear to be huge terrestrial spiders, but are in all likelihood a lot more sinister than any creature found on Earth. The smallest of them might be around the size of a Shetland pony, which, all things considered, is absolutely terrifying, but that is just the starting point. Scale it up to a larger example and you might find spiders bigger than elephants. No, thank you. The Spiders of LENG are quite intelligent, able to outsmart regular animals left, right, and center, and they use their strong webs to ensnare all sorts of prey. Just because they're intelligent doesn't mean they're above cannibalism though. Watch out for their bite too, as it's packed with an extremely potent venom. Arachnophobes and life lovers alike should hope they never come across a Spider of LENG. Coming in at number 9, we've got Unspeakable Possessors. Now sure, the name implies that nobody can speak of these, however, I'm about to do just that. Have you seen the yellow sign? Unspeakable Possessors are a race of creatures created by HASTUR himself. They start off as human beings who make a very poor choice, by my standards anyway. Those who make the unspeakable promise will be possessed by the King in Yellow and transformed. It's not a fun or even really cool transformation either. These morphed beings are humanoid in form but extremely bloated. Maybe not quite Jabba the Hutt level, but they're on the way. Their limbs become boneless and fluid with tentacle-like jaw-tipped fingers. Skin that was once soft and full of life becomes gray-green and scaly. These terrible creatures retain some semblance of intelligence and knowledge, but become creatures of base desire. Unspeakable Possessors are content to just go about destroying, killing, and consuming anything they come across. And don't think that death is the end after you make the unspeakable promise. If someone who has made said oath dies, their nearest blood relative is next in line, so reach out to your family and make sure nobody is setting you up to be a gray-green goon. Coming in at number 8, we've got Brown Jenkin. Ugh, just look at that thing. There is a 0% chance that it's up to anything good. Brown Jenkin is a rat-like creature with a human face. For a long time, it was a familiar to the witch Keziah Mason. It would nurse on her blood like a vampire and do all sorts of terrible bidding. It isn't too big, so it can scuttle around in the dark no problem and bite things with its sharp white fangs. Before becoming famous for hollowing out a man's chest and eating his heart, Brown Jenkin would just run around during the night, nuzzling people and giving them nightmares. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and seeing a horrid little rat man at the foot of your bed. Absolutely terrible. It speaks in a loathsome, tittering voice and is fluent in all sorts of languages. So actually, imagine seeing that putrid rat man in the dark, and then it starts speaking Latin at you. Good lord, kill me now. Coming in at number 7, we've got Chthonians. Not to be confused with any of Cthulhu's relatives, Chthonians are burrowing worm-like creatures, kind of like graboids, but way, way worse. They were featured prominently in Brian Lumley's The Burrowers Beneath, where he described them as flowing tentacles and pulpy gray-black, elongated sack of body. No distinguishing features at all other than the reaching, groping tentacles. Or there was, yes, a lump in the upper body of the thing, a container of sorts for the brain, basal ganglia, or whichever diseased organ governed this horror's loathsome life. Yuck. Some say they appear to be immense, slime-covered squids. However, they are indeed strictly land dwellers who can even be harmed by water. These powerful burrowers can live for thousands of years, excavating deep below the surface of whatever world they're on. In fact, the largest of the Chthonians, Shud-Mel, is thought to have caused many famous earthquakes in his burrowing. For this reason, lesser Chthonians worship him. Even terrifying creatures of a paternal side, and these worm squids are no exception. They're very protective of their young, so make sure you don't try anything funny. A team of people tried to take out a few at one point and ended up seeing why this species lives so long. Coming in at number 6, we've got the Deep Ones. Fish people, how putrid. The Deep Ones are a race of ocean-dwelling fish humanoids. They are grayish-green in color with glossy, slippery skin. Their backs are scaled and ridged, and they have webbed hands and gilled necks. Worst of all, their eyes are totally unblinking. Upon seeing a deep one, Robert Olmsted immediately passed out. That's just how terrible they are. Add in awful, inhuman voices that speak in languages previously unknown, and you've got a fabulously fearsome fish fry. Featured in The Shadow over Innsmouth, the deep ones entered a contract with local folks in order to keep the fish plentiful. In return, they made a weird human deep one crossbreed. I don't even want to imagine how that came to be. Coming in number 5, we've got CTHULHI. Now, these actually do have something to do with Cthulhu himself. Also known as the star spawn of Cthulhu, these creatures are quite physically similar to the gigantic squid monster. They are octopoid humanoids of sorts, although much smaller in scale than their progenitor. Cthulhi are composed of unknown matter, which allows them to be very physically malleable. Some might even call them shapeshifters. However, because of this, their true form may never be known. In fact, they were never truly described by H.P. Lovecraft, as he had intended them to only be envisioned. At some point, Cthulhi waged war against the Elder Things and did not fare extremely well. They reached some sort of peace, but disappeared not long after, either perishing or sinking underwater like Cthulhu himself. Coming in number 4, we've got the great race of YITH. These odd space creatures truly are great. They're able to project their consciousnesses across time and space, taking over the bodies of other species. In doing so, they swap minds with their target. At some point, they had true bodies, but it appears that they abandoned these in favor of those on Earth. Their real YITH bodies were odd cone forms. They had a muscular foot for locomotion, tentacles with claws and pincers, and trumpet-like organs. They had senses that humans do not, although we all share sight and sound. However, if a YITH swaps bodies with a human, the human is unable to access these additional senses. Not exactly a fair trade, huh? Even before humanity even existed, YITH flourished on a prehistoric Earth, but were wiped out by the flying polyps. Somehow, the great race managed to project all of their minds onto an insectoid race. Someday they will inherit the Earth. You hear that, the meek? Your days are numbered. Coming in number 3, we've got the Miko. No relation to Bad and Bougie. Miko are winged creatures that sort of resemble pinkish crabs. They've got big claws and heads with antennae and membranous wings that work better in space than on Earth. Apparently they're from Pluto or Yoggoth and have spent plenty of time exploring the universe. See, they're very technologically advanced, way more than we could even attempt to understand. And they've got a penchant for human experimentation. They'll often come down, trick a person into giving up their mind, pluck their brain, and toss it into a brain cylinder. Then the Miko will transport their new human dome tubes throughout the universe. These devices can be attached to other tech to allow the brain to experience senses once again. It must be a welcome relief to exit an existence of absolute nothingness from time to time. I suppose if you really wanted to travel the universe, this would be a relatively safe way to do it. You know, if you don't mind existing in a brain tube for the rest of your life. Coming in at number 2, we've got SHOGGOTH. These formless, shape-shifting things threw off their shackles and killed their masters. Hell yeah. SHOGGOTH were originally created by the Elder Things as a race of servant tools. However, they were made too strong and eventually rose up against them and drove them to extinction. See, a SHOGGOTH can take the form of whatever it needs at the moment, so they decided to subsume the Elder Things and apply enough suction force to kill. That's what they'll do these days too. So if you've ever wondered what it'd be like to get sucked to death, find a SHOGGOTH. They're found all over Earth these days, largely in areas like Antarctica and the depths of the oceans. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Hounds of Tindalos. While a lot smaller than a lot of the creatures on this list, these hounds are quite possibly the most terrifying. They are extra-dimensional predators with the ability to materialize at any point in space and time and devour their prey. Not much is known about their appearance, as nobody really survives after an attack. They inhabit the angles of time and as such can appear wherever corners are present, which essentially is in any human-made place. Smoke will start pouring from the corner, then their head will appear in their body, and all of a sudden you're toast. They don't give up either, so if you've been selected as prey, just know there's no escape. Sheesh. 10 terrifying tyrants. And these are all like low-level Lovecraftian beings. They only get scarier from here. The Book of the Dead, Naturam Demonto. An awful read if you're looking for something light. This cursed tome goes by many names and has been in the possession of many individuals throughout the years. However, most of these occurrences and titles come from the land of fiction. Villainous volumes have been found in folklore all throughout history though, so at some point, maybe a truly evil bundle of pages did actually exist. So, what if the Necronomicon was real? Let's talk about it. Books bound with human flesh and filled with demonic writing aren't exactly a new concept. The idea of evil goes all the way back to the beginning of humanity and is developed in all sorts of different ways. However, if we're going to talk about the Necronomicon, we've got to jump forward to the early 20th century. Howard Phillips Lovecraft, famous for penning plenty of petrifying tales of monsters beyond human comprehension, came up with a new idea. To tie a bunch of different stories together, he would create a fictional book filled with information concerning eldritch horrors. It would be written back in the 8th century by a poet who wandered the deserts around Yemen, exploring lost temples and discovering unspeakable truths. In doing so, the writer managed to compile one of the most evil texts ever seen by man and eventually met a gruesome fate because of it. After his death, the book was translated into many different languages and made its way around the world, spreading its vile influence. As a relatively definitive guide to cosmic horrors man could never hope to fully understand, it makes many appearances throughout Lovecraft's collection of stories. It's referenced in most of his famous tales, from the Dunwich Horror to At the Mountains of Madness to selected letters other authors have compiled from him. The Necronomicon is such an influential symbol that many of Lovecraft's contemporaries and admirers make use of it in their tales of the weird and inexplicable. While many consider the book itself to be cursed, it's more likely that it simply contains dangerous information. Although it has been said that anyone who's had contact with the book will come to an unpleasant end, so who knows. Simply touching or reading the book likely won't cause one's life to immediately fly off the rails, but if someone were to act upon any of the rituals or incorporate symbols found within the pages into their lives, things could get ugly. Formulas for mind transference and chants meant to summon outer gods can be found here. Descriptions of unspeakable abominations and information on where to find them is easily accessed once you have your hands on a copy. Illustrations of non-Euclidean spaces and footnotes detailing ways to get there are included too. In the right hands, the Necronomicon can be used to unleash hell on earth and grant users incredible powers. All at a very hefty price, of course. But as a book, it doesn't seem as though it's anything more than a compendium of cosmic horror information. You can find books titled Necronomicon out there in the real world. However, these texts are not the legendary tomes detailed in Lovecraftian tales. Many fans and authors in these same circles as Lovecraft published and sought out Necronomicons, although most of the time this was thought to be a joke. Fake tomes written in Latin were published, destined to be conversation pieces and decoration. Some enterprising writers even tried to pass off their work as translations of ancient texts that directly inspired Lovecraft in the first place. However, nobody has any definitive proof of a real Necronomicon at this point. And now that Lovecraftian horror is more popular than ever, you can find plenty of different Necronomicons published by big book businesses. Now that we've sort of covered the real history of the book, let's re-ask what we all came here for. What if the Necronomicon was real? Plenty to think about here for sure. If this tome truly existed, and existed in the way that H.P. Lovecraft outlined in his tales, we would have a whole lot of extra terror to contend with. For this book to be real, the made-up author Abdul Alhazred would have actually needed to compile all of this unnatural information from his travels. And if this were to have actually happened, it would imply that cosmic horrors truly do exist within our world. Not exactly something we'd be too comfortable with, right? There are a lot of implications that follow the Necronomicon around, and plenty more to worry about if this evil text makes it into our reality. On top of the general acceptance of a world with more unspeakable entities that could tear minds asunder in moments, we'd also have folks who would try to take advantage of this kind of power. You know the ones, the Whateleys and the denizens of Innsmouth and so on. Folks would get their grubby hands on the Necronomicon, or even just passages from the book, and begin to wreak havoc in every conceivable way. They could hypothetically summon YOG-SOTHOTH and have someone breed with it, resulting in a horrific barn-sized monster hell-bent on annihilation. Or maybe they would end up using the ritual meant to accelerate a human's transformation into a deep one to change a seaside community more quickly than previously thought possible. A lot of cosmic horror would leave the cosmos and make its way to us, that's for sure. To complicate matters, there's also the fact that we now live in an age of unprecedented information sharing. Back when the Necronomicon was dreamt up, getting a copy would be almost impossible unless you knew exactly who to ask and where to look. Most folks probably wouldn't even know about the book in the first place, but now, folks would be sharing excerpts online, left and right. Everyone would be trying to summon a great old one in exchange for power. It would not be a good time. No matter how closely guarded this text was, no matter how many locks and panes of glass were between the tome and the public, the moment any information got out, plenty of folks would be looking to make use of it. and that is a terrifying thought. I wonder if the unfortunate end associated with physical copies of the Necronomicon would also apply to those using the WikiLeaks version. Now, that was all just based on the Lovecraftian interpretation of this book. There's the Evil Dead version, which can harness the Kandarian demon's abilities to control both the dead and deadites, but that's a whole other can of worms. That one making it into our world would be bad too, but a lot of the power there is explicitly linked to the actual physical books, so it couldn't spread as fast. Well, there you have it. If the Necronomicon was real, we'd have to deal with the fact that Elder Gods and Great Old Ones actually exist and could ruin us on a whim. Plus, all sorts of folks would do their best to exploit the book for personal gain, resulting in a whole lot of horrid stuff happening. So, what do you think? Would the Necronomicon being real be net good or net bad? Could it be used simply for scholarship, or would people always end up falling under its evil influence? Before we managed to spread to every corner of our dear sweet planet Earth, there were forces beyond our comprehension shaping the world. The thing is, we've come to assume that these forces disappeared once we learned how to make fire and screen print novelty t-shirts. Not so, unfortunately. The void beyond our atmosphere is full of dangers, both big and small, and someday they might come down and say hello. Hell, some of them are probably already here, don't you know? Lovecraft and his contemporaries invented a multitude of terrifying beings that originated on far-off planets, or in the cold vacuum of space. Beings that would render your mind into mush should you ever lay eyes upon them. So of course, we're gonna talk about them. No great ones or elder gods though, that's a whole other video, and they really can't be compared to these guys. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to those mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're gonna be taking a look at the top 10 scary Lovecraftian monsters from space. They had a tough time doing literally anything on Earth thanks to their airy form, and they soon found out that if a human inhaled them, they could take over that person's consciousness. Bad news. So these alien gases can float around and force people to bend to their will. Yikes. I don't know if this is better or worse than the possessing spirit from Jewish mythology. Aliens versus devils, gases versus pure supernatural phenomena. I guess I'll let someone else have the final word on this. Coming in at number 9, we've got the Migo. Might as well talk about the terrifying race of aliens that Dybbuk fled from, right? These giant, flying, crab-like things are awful to behold, and that's just the beginning. The Migo are a super advanced race with technology far beyond anything humans could ever imagine. They've developed insane surgical techniques and have a deep understanding of the brain. One particularly creepy thing they love to do is steal people's brains, put the brains in brain cylinders, and then take those tubes out into the great beyond. Sometimes they'll do research on the brains, other times they'll attach them to devices that allow the brains to experience what's going on around them. Imagine having your gray matter extracted and put into a tube, left with only your thoughts forever, but then one day, you can see and hear again, but you're just a brain in a tube. Yikes. Coming in at number 8, we've got cats from Saturn. There are plenty of strange and wonderful creatures that are introduced in the dream quest of unknown Kadath, but none are as odd and lovable as the cats from Saturn. Lovecraft mentions cats a few times throughout his tales, from the town where killing cats is illegal to the cats that live on the moon and help a protagonist out in his time of need. The cats from Saturn inhabit the dark side of the moon, shoutouts Pink Floyd, and are actually enemies of Earth cats. They only sort of resemble the cats we're most familiar with and have bodies made of multicolored filigree. There's no meat on the bones, just rainbow incandescence. Cats from Saturn can form all sorts of limbs, all with terrible claws at the end. Plus their tails have a hook at the end which whip around dangerously. You definitely don't want to mess with cats from Saturn. Coming in number 7, we've got moon beasts. And speaking of dangerous creatures living on the moon, let's discuss some allies of those cats. Moon beasts. More terrifying and much more sinister than the cats, moon beasts live on the moon, and they trade in human slaves. They kidnap people from Earth and bring them up to the moon as their prisoners. And don't get me started on their looks. These things are like giant gray toads with elongated tentacly snouts where their faces should be. Supernaturally strong both in terms of physical strength and smell, they're dangerous combatants too. If you're captured by a moon beast, good luck getting out. Unless you've got some Earth cat allies trying to break you out, you're probably pooched. Coming in at number 6, we've got the Byakhi. Alright, these things are equal parts creepy and cool. Like you can ride them through space, but doing so is also extremely dangerous and you'll probably die. I'd say it's a fair trade-off. Byakhi are 3-meter insect bat things with huge membranous wings and webbed feet. They can move through space at light speed, protected by an organ that allows them to alter the magnetic field around them. They don't come to Earth unless someone summons them, but they do head down to all sorts of planets to hunt for food. Coming in at number 5, the great race of YITH. Once bound to the planet of Yith, these alien creatures are capable of projecting their consciousnesses around the cosmos in search of new bodies. At some point in the past, they found a race of cone-like creatures on Earth and mass projected themselves into their minds. Since then, they've been living here, plotting on their next move. They have waged wars against the flying polyps and the elder things in the meantime, and have seen their own downfall far off in the future. However, being able to project their consciousnesses, they've also seen that they will someday swap minds with a beetle race, and this will all take place after humanity's extinct. Yeah, they know we'll go extinct someday. Tough break, eh? Coming in at number 4, we've got the Elder Things, the OG alien race. These are the first extraterrestrials to make it to Earth. Over 1 billion years ago, they descended upon our planet and colonized it. 6 feet tall with starfish appendages on either end, they propagated and took over the world for ages. With leathery wings and tentacles, they ruled over the Earth. Cities were built, some beneath the sea and others on land. Many of their structures and cities are still around in some capacity. In fact, this shows up in the most famous story featuring Elder Things, At the Mountains of Madness, in which a team of researchers ventures deep into Antarctica and discovers the ruins of Elder Things society. The Elder Things didn't live peacefully though. They warred against the CTHULHI, the YITH, and the MIGO, and they also engineered the terrible creatures known as SHOGGOTHs, who would one day rise up and cause the collapse of Elder Things civilization. So, take some advice. Rise up and collapse a civilization, guys. It's about time. Coming in at number 3, we've got star vampires. The name alone should tell you a lot. These things are super cool and super powerful. Normally invisible, they become visible when they're full of blood. At that point, I suppose seeing it doesn't mean much because you probably just got drained, but hey. They appear to be gigantic fleshy jellyfish without facial features beyond an enormous tooth-filled mouth. It uses its muscular tentacles to crush its prey and then uses the suckers at the end of them to drain the blood. If their behavior and appearance wasn't scary enough, just know that they love to laugh. Like eerie laughter all the time when they're nearby. No thank you. Coming in at number 2, we've got NEOTHELIDS. Disgusting. As if horrific worm abominations weren't bad enough. NEOTHELIDS are huge slimy creatures with big brain powers. They have psionic abilities like being able to communicate telepathically, move objects with their minds, and fly around without wings. If you've got a weak mind, and let's be honest, who doesn't these days, these creatures can totally overwhelm you from a distance. If all these psychic abilities worry you, just wait until you hear that they're essentially immortal and resistant to pretty much all physical damage. How fun, right? Plus, they can spawn hundreds of little followers monthly, amassing armies in no time. And when I say little, I mean like 14-foot death worms. Yeah, little compared to the NEOTHELIDS, not us. Sorry, I didn't mean to get your hopes up. And finally at number 1, we've got the color out of space. Cap us off, we'll go with a planetary virus that can wipe out entire worlds. Hell yeah. The color out of space manifests as an intangible body of indescribable color, and anything it contaminates takes on some of these qualities. Once it takes root in an environment, it gets to work draining off all of the energy available. After everything's drained and the ground is no longer fertile, all is left to rot. The virus is never satisfied and must keep moving on to take over other places. It's corruption embodied, and anywhere that catches wind of it will be destroyed. Aren't you glad you're not in space right now? Imagine the stuff you might see. Definitely not what you want to deal with right now, eh? Man, there are just so many wicked monsters out there. So what'd you think of the list? How many of these Lovecraftian monsters were you already aware of? And which is your favorite? What's the scariest monster of all time? Make sure you let me know down in the comments.